What's up, everyone? Kriddle here, and the Chicago tournament is happening today. So I wanted to go over some of the decks. This is a list of all of the different decks for the tournament. It's 64 different decks, it looks like, so 64 people in the bracket. I went through each and every one of these to check out what kind of decks there are and kind of give them a little bit of my predictions on some things. We see a lot of these Sisu decks. And just a lot of Ruby Sapphire decks in general. I think this is going to be, it's a very consistent deck. I think it's very, very good. But I think ultimately people are going to be prepared for this type of deck. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, but I think they're hopeful that they can do more of an aggro deck and fight off this deck before it gets in the later game. Because these decks, almost every single one of them, for the most part, are the exact same deck. There's a few cards here and there that are a little bit different. There is one that I want to point out, though, that does look a little bit different that might do well. But for the most part, these are going to be push until end game. You're going to be drawing cards with Hiram. You're going to be using the items, obviously, for Hiram to draw cards. And then you're going to get in a late game with a Lucky Dime and Tamatoa and Sisu to be able to quest for victory. That is the goal of almost every single one of these decks, and almost all of them, like I said, are the exact same deck. There is one, however, that I wanted to point out specifically because they tried to go with a different approach to the Sisu deck, and they actually threw in here Great Stone Dragon. I don't see a lot of the Great Stone Dragon in games that I play. It's not a super common card, but this could come in handy if a lot of their cards get thrown into the discard pile early on, and they're just able to ink a lot more of those cards and get to that end game much faster, so those aggro decks don't catch up to them. So this might work out really well. It may not. Most of the time they use Fishbone Quill to do that. But if they can also use the Great Stone Dragon, then, maybe that will work out. Maybe it won't. We'll have to see. But I think that one is one that does stand out to me. Another one is the Demetrius. Where is he at? If I can find him again. Some of these I lost track of where they are, but we'll go down the list here in a second. I think I just saw it. The Dominic. This is one I want to look at as well. So this is another very common deck, which is the Bucky discard deck. You're going to see a lot of those in here. There's a Bucky discard there. There's a bounce. There's another discard. It's not a Bucky discard, but it's a discard. Another Bucky discard, Bucky discard. So you have a lot of those. There's Demetrius right there. So this is the one that I wanted to point out. Most of these decks are the exact same, but if you actually look at Demetrius, he chose to put a couple of binges in here, and I think this is going to help out quite a bit against all of those Sapphire decks, which are going to have the items, because this is a way that he can get rid of those items each turn as long as he keeps that binja out. And it could really, really help out because it's going to prevent them from being able to quest a lot with the Tamatoas, and it's going to prevent them from being able to draw a lot of cards with the Hiram. So potentially this Binja could be the difference in winning versus losing on a lot of those Sapphire decks. There's another player that did a very, very similar thing way down here. The Mufasa deck, I think it was this one right here. So Zach here has a Binja in his deck with the Mufasa deck. He only put one in there, but I still think that that's going to make a big difference. I believe that this deck, as well as the other Mufasa deck, I think there's only two of them in the entire tournament. These are going to do very well. I love these decks. I played these personally, and you just put a ton of characters in, and then you just constantly are pressuring the opponent with those characters, and then you eventually will get the Chernabog. That's the goal. Hopefully you can get it for a zero cost if you have 10 cards in your discard pile. You can get all that back, and it's completely free, and you get a really strong character out. I've actually been able to play that before, and it was amazing. I really, really love this deck. I actually played it with all 60 characters, though. I didn't even have songs or anything. However, I think with these decks that we're playing against, you're going to need to have these Babooms and other types of things like this Grab Your Sword. So you're going to have those to deal with things like Diablo, because that's another very, very popular deck. If we look up here, almost every one of these Bucky decks has Diablo in it. And then has the Diablo Devoted Herald, which is another big meta right now. When Set 4 came out, everybody's trying to get these Diablos, and they are throwing a ton of them into their decks and hopefully drawing a lot of cards from the other players. So I think what we're going to end up seeing is a lot of head-to-head between the Diablo decks and then the Sapphire decks, because Sapphire decks are going to be drawing a lot with their Hyrams, and then the Diablo decks are going to be drawing because of the Sapphire deck. So they're going to both be drawing a bunch of cards, and it's whoever can come out on top with the right draws is going to end up being the winner. So it's going to be a lot of lucky things happening there. But I think some of these people with the, that threw in the Binja that can deal with those other things while still taking out all the other characters that they need, I think those are going to end up coming out on top because it's going to be a little bit unexpected. Another one that I wanted to call out is actually two more that I want to call out of these Bucky decks. For some reason, if you look at most of these Bucky decks, there's an Ursula, but there's not an Ursula Deceiver of All, even though they have a lot of songs. So there were only two that I saw in here. There might have been more. I may have overlooked one or something. But King Couch and then Brian. So King Couch is right here. Brian have the Ursula Deceiver of All. I don't know why you wouldn't have this card in a deck that has so many songs in it. You have 16 songs. You want to put that Ursula Deceiver of All in there to get that chance to sing those songs twice. And it would be a focus for the other player. They're going to be constantly trying to take out the Deceiver of All, which hopefully will allow some of your other characters to do some things as well. If you don't have that Deceiver of All, they're not going to be a focus. And, we'll just have to see how that plays out. But I personally think that those two out of the Bucky decks are going to do better than all of the other Bucky discard decks because they have that Deceiver of All. The last one that I want to look at is all the way down here at the bottom, I believe. If we can find it. I don't see it right here very quickly. But what I want to call out about it is it's another deck that has a card in there. It's got the Sorcerer's Spellbook, and they just threw one of the Sorcerer's Spellbook in there along with their other standard deck cards for what they were playing. But I think that one Sorcerer's Spellbook is going to end up putting them on top because they're going to have an additional way to gain one lore every single turn, and a lot of these decks don't have that. Just in case their deck starts to fall apart, they don't have that backup item or card to fix a potential problem. Because most of these decks are your Sapphire Ruby decks. I would say over half of them are Sapphire Ruby decks. And then another good majority are going to be your Bucky, which is the Emerald Steel. That is the majority of all of these decks. And like I said before, almost every one of these is built almost the exact same with one or two card differences. So I think so many people are going to be prepared for those two decks that the people that have gone outside of the box and said, hey, I'm going to be prepared for that deck by throwing in this one additional card or two additional cards that will allow me to deal with some of those things a little bit easier, just in case they come in and deal with all of my stuff, because everyone's going to be, they're going to know how to deal with a lot of these decks since they're so prevalent in this tournament. So anyway, that's my consensus. That's what I feel like is going to happen. I'm going to keep an eye on this tournament, see how it plays out. We'll look at the, top maybe 16 or something along those lines once they get down to that. And we'll just see, who ends up being the number one out of this. Of course, there is a little bit of a luck factor, but there's majority skill factor in here, and having the right cards and being able to draw them at the right time is that luck factor. So the top, I would say 4 or even 8 decks are still very, very good decks, assuming they can get that far. So we'll definitely take a look at those once the tournament is over and kind of evaluate how those play out. I might even make a couple of them myself and try them at a local game store. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow, all the fun stuff. And I do stream over on Twitch, and we make all sorts of videos over here on YouTube, so check those out. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.